Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's lesson. Today, we're going to look at the second part of the Introduction to Design subject. So, in this lesson, we are going to look at the building blocks of design, and then we'll look at industry context and niches, where we'll look at the separate branches of design and some job opportunities when it comes to graphic design. And then we'll look at the path to becoming a designer or the path to design. Welcome again to this lesson. My name is Kwesi, and I'll be taking you through this lesson. First off, you're going through a summary on the previous lesson. So in the previous lesson, we looked at elements of design, and we also looked at principles of design. So in this lesson, we are going to go a little bit down into that. We'll go a little bit deeper into that, but it won't be for too long. We'll just look at the surface of what they actually are and a few examples, and then we'll move on from there. First thing we're going to look at is elements of design. So elements of design are basically the tools in design or the things that make up a design. So some of the examples we're going to look at is line. So here we see that a line or lines are marks that span a distance between 2 points, and they can be straight, curved, thick, or thin. So lines are a basic or a most used element inside of graphic design. We use lines a lot in design. And the next example we are going to look at is shape. So a shape or shapes are areas defined by boundaries such as circles, squares, or organic forms. So that's what a shape is. And then another example we have here is color. Color is the use of hue, saturation, and value to evoke emotion or highlight data. So some examples of color we have are red, yellow, green, magenta, cyan, and other colors as well. Other elements or other most important or crucial elements in design we have are or is typography. So typography is one of the most used elements in graphic design, and we'll be using that element a lot also in addition to the shapes, color, and the other elements. So here we have typography is the art of arranging type to make text legible and visually appealing. And then we have texture. So texture is the surface quality or how something looks like it would feel. So in the example here, we can see the texture of a wood. So here we can see that the wooden texture is rough. So we can have a rough texture, we can have a smooth texture, and we can also have a glossy texture. And then last but not the least, we have space. So here space is the area around or between elements. So we have positive or negative space, and then we have white space. We'll take a look at that when we begin our design practical course or lessons. Next, we have principles of design, or you can call them the rules of design. And I think I mentioned this in the previous lesson. So our first example here is hierarchy. So hierarchy is the arranging of elements to show their order of importance. So hierarchy is one of the most important rules or principles in design, especially when you are designing a flyer. You need to make sure that you arrange them from the most important to the least important. So the most important in most cases will be the title or let's say if it's an event flyer, the most important one, there will be the title of the event, and there may be the theme of that event, and then other details like the date, time, and call to action. Okay, and the next one we have here is balance. So balance is the distribution of visual weight. So balance is basically when you have two equal amounts of weight of a design on each side to balance the work out. So here it says that we have symmetrical balance, asymmetrical balance, or radial balance. And next we have alignment. So alignment is the connecting elements visually to create a sense of order. So as you can see in our example here, we have a type of alignment, which is a text alignment, where we have our text aligned to the left side of our layout. And the next example we are looking at is proximity. So proximity here is basically grouping related items together to create a relationship. So in the example here, we can see proximity. We have a group of circles and then a triangle. So the proximity shown here is the grouping of related items, which is the shaped circle, or let's say shapes in general together to create some sort of relationship. Next thing we are looking at now is industry context and niches. So here we are going to look at common design terms to know and also graphic design niches. Okay, so here we are looking at common design terms you should know in graphic design. So first we have raster and vector. So a raster is a digital image made up of a grid of thousands of pixels. And then vectors are images built using mathematical formulas rather than colored pixels. So with these two terms, raster images or raster is basically used in softwares like Canva and Photoshop, whereas vector is mostly used in Illustrator. We'll take a look at that more when we begin the introduction to Photoshop and introduction to Adobe Illustrator. Our next term or terms here is DPI. DPI basically means dots per inch, and then we have PPI. PPI means pixels per inch. So DPI or PPI, dots per inch or pixels per inch, are resolution standards for print. So in print, we could have 300 DPI and then digital 72 PPI. So mostly for printworks, we use the resolution of 300 DPI, and for digital or on-screen designs, we use a DPI or PPI of 72. Next thing we are looking at is the bleed. So a bleed is the area of a print document that goes beyond the trim to ensure colors reach the edge. So mostly when we are designing for print, to make sure we leave some space around the borders of the design. So that area that is left is what we define as bleed. So mostly when the design or the product is printed, it goes through a trimming process. So they trim out the area that was left, which is the bleed. And then next we have kerning and leading. So kerning is the space between letters. So each space you see in between the letters over here are called kerning, the spaces in between the letters. And then we have leading. Leading is the space between lines of text. So the spaces between each line of text is what we call leading. Next, we have some graphic design niches. So here are a few niches in graphic design. First, as we discussed in the second lesson, brand identity. So a brand identity designer designs logos, color palettes, and brand manuals for various brands or businesses out there. And then we have marketing and advertising. So what the marketing and advertising designer does is that they create social media posts, billboards, and flyers. So this is basically what we are going to do in this course. And thirdly, we have UI UX design. So they design user interfaces for apps and websites. All those fancy things you see on a website or an app are designed by UI or UX design. UI means user interface and UX means user experience. And then we have, lastly but not the least, motion graphics. So motion graphic designers, what they basically do is to animate logos, make explainer videos, and video transitions. The path to design. So here we are going to look at the workflow and intro to some professional tools. But the intro to professional tools will be done in the next lesson. That will be in lesson 4, where we delve into professional tools like Photoshop. Yeah, we'll delve into Photoshop in the next lesson. Okay, so the path to design. So in design, we have 4 main steps or 4 main rules or processes you need to go through to come out with your design. So first we have the brief. So this is where you understand the client's problem. So the brief or a design brief basically entails what the client wants you to do for them, or what kind of work or deliverables they want you to give them at the end of the project. So a client will approach you with their problem. Maybe they are starting a business and they don't have a logo, they don't have colors that represent their brand. So they'll come to you with their brief. So in this brief, their giving you the task they want you to accomplish or the task they want you to complete, which is coming up with a logo for their business or their brand, and also coming up with a brand system, where this brand system is mostly or usually represented or presented in the form of a brand manual. So a brand manual contains your logo, it contains your brand colors that represent your brand, it contains your values, your core values, and it also contains how the logo should be used on other designs or other platforms. So this brand manual that the creative designer or visual designer is going to create will have all these things concerning the logo, from how to use it to the wrong ways of using it, to the right ways of using that logo, the right ways of using their colors and all that. And once you have the brief, once you have the design brief, next thing is the research and ideation. So here you are looking for inspiration and sketching concepts. So once you've gotten the brief, once you know what the client wants you to do for them, that's when you delve into research. So here you go online and look for brands or similar brands that have the same goals in mind. Let's say if you are working with a restaurant, a food brand, you go online and look for other food brands and look at what they are doing, how their logos look like, how they work with their colors, and how their brand manual or brand systems look like. And then you use that as a reference to create this new brand identity or this new design for your clients. So you go out there are many sources of inspiration that you can pick from, or many sources of references you can pick from. You can go to Behance, you can go to Pinterest, and then look at what others are doing, and then you can take inspiration from all of that, and then you can input it into whatever you're trying to create. But you shouldn't copy what someone has already done. You just use that as a reference and then create something new from that. And also, the next thing we are looking at is execution. So once you've done all your research, once you've gone through the brief, you studied the brief, had your meetings with the clients and discussed whatever the client needs and what you're going to deliver to the client. And also you have done your research and your ideation, looking at how the logo is going to be like, what you're going to do with the how you're going to choose the colors that will represent your brand and all that. The next thing you're going to do is to execute whatever idea or whatever plans you've brought out from that research. So here is where you use software to bring the idea to life. So here you already have the ideas and how you want to go about the design, the logo design, the flyer design. So here you are going to choose the software that you want to bring that idea to life. If it's, let's say, a photo manipulation, or let's say a flyer or poster with a lot of image manipulation, you can go with Photoshop, and you can use Photoshop as a tool or software to bring that idea to life. If it's a logo that you're creating, you can open a software like Illustrator and then use Illustrator to bring your ideas to life. But execution is not only about just opening up the software and then you start working. What you have to do first is to plan the design. So what you can do here is to have a sketchbook or a digital sketchbook, and you have a tool like the drawing tablet, and then you sketch out your ideas. Okay, I think that'll be part of the number 2, which is the ideation. So you sketch out your ideas and have like a prototype of what you want the final thing to look like, and then you carry out the execution of the work. And then 4, we have feedback and iteration. So here is where you refine based on critiques. So here you send whatever you executed to the client or the customer to look at, and once they approve, or let's say they have some thoughts of their own, maybe they want you to change a few things, they want you to add, make some subtractions on the design. This is where you do it. This is where you go through all that. So here you might be going back and forth with the clients just to come out with the final thing. Okay, so I think I'll end today's lesson here. In our next lesson, we're going to look at the introduction to Photoshop, and then how you can get started with this software and other things. Make sure you subscribe to the channel, like, and then see you in the next lesson.